Rumble's having trouble here. Let me go figure that out real quick, Norm.
Should I get started, or should
Yeah,
we
go
start
ahead.
up?
Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. You're listening to Mike and I having a little, social network us interrupt us. Apparently, we're having a little trouble getting it up, as it were, on Rumble. Mike's working on that, but I'm talking away anyhow. Good morning. Another week of law and legitimacy. I don't know how you all spent your weekend. I spent mine in the office, grinding away on an appellate brief for Alex Jones. We're taking an appeal of the $1.5 billion judgment that he suffered as a result of the Sandy Hook fiasco in Connecticut. And I do refer to that trial as a fiasco. You heard it here first. I predict we will get a new trial on that case. I don't think the default that was entered against Jones was appropriate as a matter of law. I think it was a disproportionate sanction that the court, the defendants never raised claims that he'd spoliated evidence that he'd made unavailable to them. And they didn't, because I think they knew a larger truth. He hadn't spoliated or destroyed anything. He was just disorganized and didn't have what they wanted. They were able to persuade a judge that he withheld material he had. He didn't, and there was a default entered. He lost the ability to defend on the merits, and then the court entered into a series of unusual evidentiary rulings that transformed the trial, frankly, into a wake with benefits. And the result, unsurprisingly, was that some of the most sympathetic people in the United States, that is, those who had lost children to a mass shooting at the Sandy Hook at the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, on December 14th, 2012, became, at least notionally, that is, on paper, multi-millionaires. Of course, there isn't that kind of money in Alex Jones's universe. The plaintiffs are now in bankruptcy court, trying where Jones had sought relief on a voluntary basis. Settlement discussions are afoot. Rumor has it that some of the plaintiffs want to settle. Some of them want to simply destroy Alex Jones. They'll seek to force him into involuntary bankruptcy and force liquidation of free speech systems. Jones will then fight whether the debt that they have over him is dischargeable or not, and the default judgment may well be result in a dischargeable judgment because he didn't have the opportunity to defend on the merits. The bankruptcy court may not give that judgment the effect that its creditors want. So, I mean, I've said a lot there. We'll say more over time, but that's how I blew my weekend. Mike blew his, being a good father, a doting husband, and trying to have a life. And so we got on the phone this morning to talk in our pre-game show, or on the air here, and we both concluded, man, we got nothing today. So
we do have plenty. In fairness, we got plenty, and I think
there's plenty going on in the world, but we don't have it.
Yeah, Rumble should be back online now. And sorry for those of you who were over on Rumble. Something was wrong with the stream key, but we should be good to go here.
Oh, no, we've got Aperture of My Soul, Lawyer Will, Bathtub Liquor, In the Cloud. So, hey, we're with it more or less. But what's going on in the world? I wanted to see the Lakers and the Celtics.
Michael is an idiot. Everybody call me an idiot in the chat. Put a thumbs up on this video if I am a remarkably big idiot.
My thumb up sign isn't big enough because I just pressed it. It said "back at you, moron," and I said, "What? I'm more on than off most days." No, that's not what we mean by moron. And the thumb just got bigger. It poked me right in the eye. So what the hell's going on? What's going on with the NBA? I wanted a Celtic Lakers playoff. You promised me we were going to get a Celtics Lakers playoff, and it looks like neither the Celtics nor the Lakers can even win a game. And what we're going to have Miami versus Denver. I mean, I imagine some guy in a cigarette boat, going, hauling it into Denver saying, "Where can I put my boat in the water, bro?" And then there's John Denver singing in the airport lounge, "Rocky Mountain High." I mean, I want to kill myself over that idea. There is no basketball in those towns. There's no magic in those towns. I want Celtics and the Lakers. What happened?
I have no idea what's going on, other than the fact that the Nuggets are the 1 seed and they're supposed to be here.
I mean, Nuggets. You can't even have a whole piece of chicken. We got nuggets. In their ball sack, they've got tiny little marbles. I mean, what up with that?
It's a weed reference. It's Denver, nice nugs. Anyway, the Nuggets are supposed to be here, and they've played phenomenally. The Lakers were never supposed to be here, and they just caught fire at the right time of the season, I reckon, as we say here in the South. What's going on over in the East is a little crazy, right? Because the Heat are the 8 seed. They had to get in. They had to do a play-in game to even get a chance to face the 1 seed, the Milwaukee Bucks, in the first round of the playoffs. And here they are about to sweep the Boston Celtics in a run for the NBA Finals. I don't know what the heck is going on. And I say that just because, like you started out by saying, you were promised a Lakers-Celtics Finals. It seemed like that's what was being telegraphed here, right? That LeBron in his 20th season was going to make a late career run to the finals, and we were going to get some sort of spin-off of the years of yore, the Magic Bird years, as it were. And here we are. We're going to get the Miami Heat and the Denver Nugs.
This is proof. I'm about ready to give you all prima facie proof that there are hidden forces in the universe that determine what we do, and that we are not free in our will, but these hidden forces, if you know how to read them, discern what's going to happen. How do I know the NBA Finals are not going to be interesting? I got home, got about 6 o'clock last night, 5:30, 6 o'clock from the office. I was going to get on the exercise bike, torture my heart for a while, and watch some, I thought I'd watch some basketball. So I turned the television on, and on comes golf. Now, I had never watched golf on television. To me, that's sort of like watching two senior citizens have sex. Okay, it just doesn't work for me. Oh, grandma, roll over. Let's do it again like we did when we were kids. No, that was 80 years ago, Hector. I'm not sure the oil works down there. Change the pan. So, but I turned the golf on and I watched golf. And that was the universe signaling to me the basketball season is over. There's nothing worth watching. And so I may as well watch guys stroke balls on a course. And so I did, and I enjoyed it. So the NBA season is over, done. But let's move on to public affairs. Justin Carter's got a suggestion that was on Mike and my mind. If you're not from Connecticut, you won't know the story, but it illustrates a growing trend in the country. Recall, obviously, last year at about this time, there was a leak. Oh, the United States Supreme Court is going to overturn Roe versus Wade, and it became so in the case of Dobbs versus Mississippi Women's Health Center. And the issue of abortion was returned to the states. Those of you who are scholars of constitutional law might have found that decision understandable, even acceptable, as a reallocation of the federal police powers to the states and a decision to take from the federal radar the creation of rights that involve the public's health, education, and welfare. It certainly was a profoundly disruptive event, though, because for 50 years, Roe versus Wade had stood for the proposition that there was a federal right to have an abortion. That was a sort of ungainly decision within the federal structure, and constitutional scholars can argue about it one way or another. The issue was returned to the states, and there was an argument that's where it belongs. Well, in Connecticut, we saw how this issue is going to unfold and how deeply seated the issue is and how explosive it's going to be in years to come. Just last week, Governor Ned Lamont nominated a woman named Sandra Glover to the Connecticut Supreme Court. The Connecticut Supreme Court is a court consisting of 7 justices.
What a wild middle name, just to say that. What in the world?
Yeah, but but what a last name too, right? But I've known of Glover for years. Connecticut's a very small state, brilliant woman. There is not a person at the bar in Connecticut who's passed the bar who's got a bad thing to say about Glover. She is an impeccable scholar, former federal prosecutor, but you got to earn a living somehow. Knows the law, has integrity, is honest. She's a perfect pick for the Supreme Court. Ned Lamont was forced to withdraw her nomination last week. Why? Glover was not going to be approved by the legislature. And the reason for that is her support of Amy Coney Barrett. When Amy Coney Barrett was a candidate for the appellate court, I think for the D.C. Circuit. Glover and others wrote in praise of Amy Coney Barrett, and this was enough to persuade radicals in the Connecticut legislature. And I know you're thinking, radicals, Connecticut, the land of Paisley habits, but this was enough to this state is so blue, how blue is this state? You bleed blue here, right? This state is so blue that red meat can't be sold here. You've got to eat grasshoppers. But in any case, they said, look, her support of Glover's support of Barrett disqualified her from sitting on the United States Supreme Court or the Connecticut Supreme Court because Barrett voted in favor of Dobbs v. Mississippi. There is that is filled with so many non sequiturs. It's an embarrassment to the state of Connecticut. Lamont didn't have the votes to get Glover through because Glover wrote in support of Amy Coney Barrett years ago, and Coney Barrett voted against abortion. Therefore, the geniuses in the Connecticut legislature reached the conclusion that as a result of that support for Barrett, who had not yet cast that vote, Glover was disqualified, because we must make sure that a woman's right to secure an abortion is secure. So the no fetus can beat us state, Connecticut, got rid of a perfectly qualified candidate for the Connecticut Supreme Court because that person managed to praise a Catholic jurist when she was going to be appointed to the District Court of Appeals, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and praised her ability as a jurist, her temperament, and her demeanor. That just doesn't make sense, Mike. It suggests
no, it makes perfect sense because hindsight is always 20/20 these days, and it's easy to see now that we never should have been seriously considering Glover as a candidate anyway because she's held these really problematic opinions forever. And if had we only looked back in 2017 at those remarks, those remarks couldn't have been predicated on Amy Coney Barrett perhaps being appointed to the DC Circuit, right? And that as being a basis for, female representation at the higher reaches of the judiciary, federal or otherwise. It couldn't have been that. Because at the time that would have been politically expedient to talk about, and perhaps why they would have solicited the opinion of another female jurist, potential jurist. So anyway, it's devoid of context. Like you said, it's filled with a number of non sequiturs. I guess the question ultimately, Norm, is who will the Connecticut legislature get behind?
Well, so this being a small state and me being a gossip monger, I'm aware of candidates who are being considered. For example, there is a young woman, Hope Seeley. Well, young woman. I'm so old that if you're unless you've qualified for Medicare, you're a young person. That's how old I am. I'm so old that when I go to the store right now, people wonder whether they should serve me because I might not live long enough to pay their bill by the time they ring it up on the cash register. I'm so old, I still think they use cash registers. That's how old I am. But in any case, Hope Seeley, that's a name to watch. Hope Seeley was a partner of a now deceased lawyer named Hubert Santos. I believe she's in her early 50s, and she is, by anyone's account, a brilliant lawyer. She's a hardworking lawyer as a criminal defense lawyer. She quickly ascended. She was appointed a judge. She went to the appellate court. Rumor has it she's been offered a seat on the Supreme Court, not once, but twice, and that she declined in both instances because she didn't think she was ready and she had a lot to learn. Hope Seeley doesn't have a lot to learn. Hope Seeley's modesty makes her look a little bit like the Pope, declining thrice before the College of Cardinals finally says you're doing it. And then they're saying, well, okay, it must be God's will. So I'm told that Hope Seeley was offered a spot on the Supreme Court several years ago. She was felt out to be a nominee for the Glover seat and said she's not ready. I'm encouraging the governor's office to go back to Hope Seeley. And I'm not sure what the legislature can say about her. I'm sure they'll find something. Justin Carter, I think it's Seeley, Hope Seeley. You got the first name spelled right. So Hope Seeley, I suspect, will be it. There are other names out there. I don't want to jinx anybody's candidacy by talking about them. I've had friends be in the running for judgeships, and they often call me to let me know that they're doing it, and they beg me not to support them
Or, by the way,
publicly.
shut up, you know?
Yeah, that might be the kiss of death. Hey, what's going on in Florida? I mean, I guess the NAACP doesn't want people traveling to Florida, and other non-governmental organizations have also given a travel warning. Florida is going to, I get, are they lynching people there, or are they just not subscribing to the woke identity? I mean,
Well,
what's going on?
it's tough to tell exactly what's going on. The Miami Herald reports on this, and so what I have on the screen is the Miami Herald's story, I guess, yesterday afternoon about this. But what's going on in Florida is not just one thing, right? So we have a governor in Ron DeSantis who should be, I guess, announcing his plans to run for president sometime this week. Even in this article, I believe it was reported that he is filing all the necessary paperwork, et cetera. But what is going on in Florida has been a microcosm of what we have seen as a result of the COVID excesses the last several years. And in particular, we've talked on this stream before about the use of specific literature in school libraries, parents' access and oversight regarding the curriculum and what and how their students are being taught, and the excesses of what has been deemed DIE, diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I'm borrowing that phrasing of the acronym from Tim Pool, who has rejected DEI and gone with DIE, which I like a little bit better.
Me too. It ought to die.
How the NAACP, I guess, overlaps with the interests of LGBTQ plus identities is lost on me. But I admit that I'm not working very hard to discern the overlap either. So maybe that's more me than anyone else. But this article talks about the fact that there have been a number of different measures that Governor DeSantis has undertaken in the last couple of years. And because of that, the environment for minorities, people of color, those in the LGBTQ plus community, that Florida is harmful for their health, apparently.
So what has Governor DeSantis done that has harmed the health of minorities? He said, I don't want to have an AP curriculum in the schools that focuses on African-American history and the need for reparations and the need and that focuses on American history as the story of racial injustice. So he doesn't want to have that in the schools. He has been supportive of excluding certain books from public schools in the library. In libraries, I actually agree with the NAACP on that. What else has he done that has created this toxic and hostile environment?
Well, recall that DeSantis has been a beacon of civil liberties throughout the COVID era. And that's something, Norm, that I've talked to you about before that gave him much promise as a potential run for president, is how he handled and how he signaled freedom from the state of Florida throughout COVID. And what he did was really reduce and eliminate as many restrictions on businesses, the freedom of movement of individuals and citizens within Florida, mask mandates. He did a lot to get away from mandates for the vaccine, et cetera, in those years leading up. So all of that is what primed a lot of these other movements. I mean, he definitely gained momentum in so doing that politically. But what we're watching now is that these measures he's taken most recently, especially when it comes to the, what do they say, the "Don't Say Gay" bill. That's how it was branded in Florida. When in particular he's talking about I think access, parents' access to information regarding their children while in the custody of the public school system. These are all things related to this, Norm. So it's not any one thing. It's the cumulative effort.
No, but I mean, the notion that somehow, as a result of wanting parents to know what's going on with their children's education, with not wanting to politicize people on behalf of one group or another as part of public education, with defending traditional values and wanting to keep out of libraries books that celebrate what used to be regarded as deviancy, now is just regarded as another way of life. How all of these create a toxic environment for anybody is difficult to say. The notion that somehow Florida needs to be punished because it is a dangerous, hostile environment for law-abiding Americans and immigrants. This one is pretty funny. This is from LULAC President Domingo Garcia. Now, what's LULAC, you say? Is that a flower that has got some sort of genetic?
League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC.
Okay, so now, here's the problem. If you bring an undocumented person to an event, they might be excluded. If you bring your aunt to Disney World, to Miami or Universal Studios, you're going to be charged with a felony for bringing your undocumented friend or relative to Florida, LULAC President Garcia says. Florida is a dangerous, hostile environment for law-abiding Americans and immigrants. Excuse me, Domingo, those undocumented people might be referred to as illegal immigrants. So how do you become lawful? By walking in and saying, yo estoy here? It just doesn't work that way, Domingo.
Well, what we have in the chat and Rumble is really good. So High Society, remember, is a Florida resident, Florida citizen. And he says a lot is going on in Florida. In the Cloud says Florida has a high population of people of color. Not visiting there hits the economy and impacts the very people they're advocating for, which is counterproductive. High Society responds by saying, oh, don't worry, they're still going. And he's, just make sure they have sunscreen. And Aperture of My Soul asks, didn't Florida have their highest tourism numbers in the first quarter? And High Society confirms, yes, but also says that it's very, very toxic and hateful what's going on in Florida right now. And
what's toxic and hateful? What is toxic and hateful?
I've asked High Society to say a little more if he can. I know he may be traveling right now, but it seems that perhaps the environment in Florida isn't immune from any of the issues that we've seen in other major metropolitan areas around the country, that things are very divisive. Law enforcement has issues enforcing the law. We've seen a lot going on in Florida with respect to law enforcement here lately as well. And I think that, in positive signs is what I'm saying for law enforcement. But if we can get High Society to say a little bit more, he says, I know someone personally who not only pays his bills, but pays his taxes. A normal American can't get any legal status here. It's crazy.
Well, here's the thing that catches my.
He says hateful as far as the gender divide.
Here's the thing that catches my interest. It's this narrative again that if you are, unless you support the DEI or the DIE narrative, you're a white supremacist and you're an extremist. What happens if you just happen to be a person who was born white, whatever that means, because we know that race is a social construct until you want something, in which case white gets reified and it becomes a one-way. It becomes an entitlement ticket, in other words, how much do I owe you? But what happens if you were just minding your own business? Maybe you went to Florida, maybe you retired in Florida, maybe you grew up there, and you're going about the business of paying your bills, and suddenly you're told that as a result of your skin color, you now owe somebody something, reparations, let's say, or you're now told that because your libidinal compass points against in the direction of the opposite sex, you're somehow a supremacist. You're somehow a hate monger unless you want to support the idea of others to do with others whatsoever they please. It used to be the case that we had traditions in this country that were worth defending, and that a politician could run on a platform of defending traditional values. Now, if you become a traditional values candidate, you become an extremist or far-right extremist, maybe a white supremacist if you happen to be white. So I'm looking at what is going on in Florida with DeSantis, and I'm not a DeSantis fan or supporter, but I'm looking at this as a cultural battlefield, and this business about boycotting Florida because DeSantis won't adopt an LGBTQ flag, won't apparently adopt a reparations mindset, and wants to say that there are people in this country who simply want to be let alone and left to mind their own business, that they're extremists, that somehow this is going to help the DeSantis candidate, because there are plenty of people in the United States who are fed up about being told that they owe something to someone else on account of their skin color, or that a person who walks in with the latest sort of diversity claim is entitled to a privileged position and extra regard just because of how they express themselves in the world. I say I'm for DeSantis, and I hope he doubles down.
Yeah, I don't think there's any threat that he would do otherwise. To me, this has long been an issue of power games in Florida. Like I said, I was, here in North Carolina, Governor Roy Cooper handled the COVID stuff like an imbecile.
Yeah.
And many people wouldn't be willing to say that, but I was one of the few people who saw the politicization and was attempting to speak openly about that early on. And what DeSantis was able to do, in the criticism of DeSantis, is necessarily that he was not who he became at the beginning, which I don't necessarily put a lot of stock in that criticism, but for whatever it's worth, he was able to arc back towards something that was a beacon and a symbol of American prosperity, individual sovereignty, and freedom within Florida. And that's something that, if you're on the political left, if you're in the upper reaches of power politically, on the left in 2023, is problematic for this sort of collectivized sense of what the country should be doing economically, politically, socially, et cetera. The idea that the individual would be able to make his or her own decision, and that children's education would be informed by what the parents want to see, and that there's not going to be an environment for young impressionable minds to be taken advantage of in a way that is very obvious to any reasonable thinking person, but simply doesn't appear that way when things make headlines and are shared on social media. So I was hoping that, if he does make a run for president, I think that's disappointing. I think that what he's done in Florida is incredibly important, and that he has more work there yet to do. And I'm not the only one that shares that belief. And it's just, this is me speaking as a North Carolina citizen, that Florida should wrap itself around DeSantis and ask him to stay there for a little longer.
Maybe, but I mean, we do need some alternative to Donald Trump. I know that some of you listeners out there are thinking that Trump's it, but I think of Trump as having reached his sell-by date, and it's time to move on. And I think that to the degree that DeSantis hits on something that is the individual's sense of autonomy, of efficacy in his own skin, in his own family, in his own neighborhood, in his own community, in his own state, in his own country, and that individualism and measuring people by the worth of what they do rather than their status or what they are, is something that corresponds to a deep chord in American life and in Western civilization as well. Oh, and dare I use that expression, Western civilization? Isn't that yet another sign of supremacy? Doesn't that make me a hate monger by suggesting that there's something unique, admirable, and worth defending in the West? Well, there is. And if you deny it, you're full of shit. And excuse my language, you're full of feces. Hey, take a look this weekend, if you can, at this weekend's Wall Street Journal. There's a review of a new biography, DJ Taylor, on George Orwell. It was a relatively long review. I'm inspired to read the book eventually, but it's going to have to get in my list of about 9,000 other things to read. But Orwell, when he wrote Animal Farm and when he wrote 1984, he wasn't writing about farming. He was writing about what happens in a society where ideas are used,
right?
Or the future. Yeah. He was writing about us. He was writing about what happens when a sense of orthodoxy transforms us into objects to be manipulated by those who determine what the orthodoxy is. He was writing about a dystopian universe in which information creates a society in which everyone can be controlled and monitored. And the protagonist, the hero, in 1984 was an individual who said, "I can't do that. I want to live in my own skin." And so I think, in our discussion of DeSantis, my mind turns to Orwell and this new biography of Orwell, and my sense that we need to have a renewed appreciation of people who wrote about simple integrity, about transactional exchanges between individuals not being coded representations of history and grievance, but being exchanges between people in a marketplace of ideas, in a marketplace where goods and services are exchanged, where individuals appraise one another, make a determination of how valuable they can be to one another, and enter into exchanges not because not overladen with grievance, but steeped in value. What values do you have? What of value can you offer to me? That's what the American people ache for. And I think this is where DeSantis was right with respect to the public health state, Mike, and I appreciate you reminding me of that when there was a time then when elites were able to say, this is what we must do to be safe, DeSantis said, wait a minute, let us decide what we need to do to be safe. We don't need to be told from on high what's what about how to be safe or even how to be just. And so I reject the rhetoric of white supremacy. I reject the rhetoric that I'm an extremist because I say of the DEI or DIE crowd, yeah, go away. Take your sense of entitlement somewhere else. I'm going to pay the same $2, $3 for a half a gallon of milk that you are. You don't get a discount because of how you were.
Seedless watermelons were $10 per in the grocery store yesterday. Just throw
Where?
it in the grocery store.
Well, what's a seedless watermelon?
Come on, Norm.
Is that like a virginal whore? I mean, watermelons have seeds,
It's a GMO melon,
I don't want a GMO. I don't want a Gitmo melon. I'll grow my own melons. Thank you.
Well, look, we've got two things that I think we should, maybe at least one that we should pick up tomorrow. But I think Brian Kohberger is scheduled to be arraigned today. I know that's something that you and I will continue to track in the coming weeks. And also, this is something I will definitely make sure we talk about tomorrow. All day I dream about shareholders. So ADIDAS has announced that they will begin resuming sales of their YEEZY branded products at the end of May, signaling that money is king to that company. And they were also facing down a shareholder lawsuit that was filed earlier in May. So you and I can unpack a lot of that. I have my thoughts. I know that you'll have questions for me, and I welcome those.
My first question is, did you come up with that? All day I dream about shareholders. That's pretty good. I like that.
Look, it's always, and I can't take credit for it. Killer Mike had the song ADIDAS. All day I dream about sex, right? That was always the acronym. I just turned it to shareholders.
All day I dream about sex. Well, I mean, so thus proving he was a Sigmund Freudian. Justin, we will get to that. I tweeted yesterday about finding the Bible again. I didn't say older man. I said old man. Get it right, Justin. We'd love to hear me elaborate about that tomorrow. Well, I'll get to it as the Spirit, no pun intended, moves me. So we've talked our way through another half an hour of your lives. Thanks for coming in. A little unfocused, a little rattled, a little bit of gas underneath the hood today, but it's Monday. We had a long weekend. We got a long week to come. Join us again tomorrow. Tell us what you want to talk about. Maybe we'll do one of those Ask Me Anything things again.
I think it's about time for that. Now that we're on the other side of the Proud Boys trial, I think.
What trial?
Yeah, exactly. No one's even talking about it anymore. Just the CHS presence. Anyway, yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. You can find us on Twitter, Rumble, YouTube. We're live there every single day at 8 a.m. If you're an audio-only listener or for whatever reason you don't catch us live, obviously the videos stay there on those platforms. But if it's easier for you to find it via Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, we're there too. Just make sure to rate us. Consider joining Locals. We are going to begin doing better stuff there via Locals. I think Norm and I may have been led astray by an idea, but we'll bring it back to center. I've got something for us.
How can you be led astray by an idea? Entertain every idea and go down every rabbit hole. Every now and then you'll come up with something. More often than not, you'll just be lost. But better to be lost with an idea in your head than to be found with nothing going on upstairs.
Indeed. On that wisdom, we're getting out of here. Have a good Monday, Norm. We'll see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, everybody.